Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, welcome, everybody. I'm not so technically inclined. I learn what I need to get done only by, pushing the buttons and trying things out, experimenting, and a lot of it is hit and miss. But I am grateful because for the most part it works out. I do believe that it is that idea of never giving up, right? In adapting and conquering and trying again, that things eventually, right, work out, right? It's the truth in the way my life has always moved about, but I think in nature, it just makes sense. Even great writers, and I'm not going to credit anybody to that, but that it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, you know, things can't stay bad forever. We move from the good to the worse. And we slip again from the worst to the calm, right? To the joy, and to all these different emotions. And I tell you, I used to swing so badly. I'm not saying badly, but in, I guess, a way badly, because it made it so that I was like swinging at like a piñata, all blindfolded, and just hoping to make a connection with that piñata, that the treasures would spill out, and right, everybody would be cheering and laughing and smiling. It's not always the case that it works that way. But the thing is, if you don't give up, right? If you try, if it just seems like the silliest thing, that you don't have anything left in you except breathe, then breathe, right? Then just breathe, and eventually, right, you move out of it, right? And sometimes it's just, right, just holding your breath and getting out of those moments. The only reason I'm saying this, right, is I'm coming out of I heard there was some fires in Western Canada, and Manitoba, we're struggling a little bit too with some wildfires. But it's been such a mild, and I'm not saying mild in a humidic kind of way, but I'm in a warmth, right? In a dry kind of way. Our weather has been this winter. We didn't get much of a winter. The water lines are low. There wasn't much snow in the fields, and it is dry. And Canada had a strange winter, but we kind of knew it was going to affect us, right? We knew it was going to kind of affect us. Right, it was like springtime all winter long. And in that goodness, we have to recognize that more than likely we'll be moving into weather that might not be so comfortable. And I do believe that, fires, because it's part of Mother Nature, right? The storms, the rain, the fire, forest fires, it's all Mother Nature. And my heart goes out to the people who are possibly losing their homes. My heart goes out to those animals in the trees that are scared and hunkering down rather than taking off in flight. Well, I'm sure the birds will take off in flight. But what about the squirrels and the deer and the bears, and right, all these small critters that don't have these experiences very often, and now they're thrown into the turmoil, right? They'll have to adapt and conquer, never give up, find a way. And if they do, right, there is that possibility that they'll be able to move into something a little bit calmer, right? And find something a little bit better for themselves. It is sad. It is kind of sad, in the news. I went in to the news tonight specifically. I just wanted to know what was going on with the fires. I just wanted to know what was going on in the fires. And I guess they weren't talking about the fires in Manitoba because specifically I went in to see how our province was doing. And it turned out they were talking about BC. But then I thought, well, after they're talking about BC, then they'll talk about what's going on here. So I started, right, following the news a little bit. And it was just one topic after another. And it was just thick and heavy and sad. And it was, right, and I felt it. I felt, right, my heart went out to all of it. But at the same time, I was a little bit maddened by some of it because of the directness of the feed, right? The directness of the feed of not intermittently, right, mixing the turnips in with the mashed potatoes. So I say, that those good topics, those light topics weren't mixed in there. It was just one topic and worse and worse and worse. And it was just like, are you kidding me? This is how much we are, right, fighting to get each other's attention, that we're just traumatizing each other and traumatizing each other in a way that I got involved in topics in the Middle East and countries that, right, I don't know too much of, but I understand if things come across my path, right, that I will be on it, just like I wanted to know about the fires, right? And then I just got some deep insight into, oh my goodness, probably 10 or 15 other tragedies going on in the world, and not one bright bit of sunshine in all of that. I am grateful that I am not compulsed by the news. I am so grateful for that. I couldn't imagine how difficult that would be to watch the 6 o'clock news every single day. I have no offense to the people who do, but truly, right? That is not healthy, right? I mean, that is going to put you in survival mode for sure. And some of these things, a lot of these things are like thousands and thousands of miles away, that no matter what, in your adapt and conquer, that you would never be heard or seen in your opinion as to what's going there, except for maybe your husband who's sitting there watching the news with you, right? And then you guys are just feeding off each other with that. Get yourself all worked up and then go to work the next day, and you take that to work as the topic of the day, and ooh, everybody's in it. And then people who've never heard anything about it, well, now they're delving into the 6 o'clock news. You could tell I won't be in the 6 o'clock news for a little bit. I was not impressed. It has gone much worse since I've given up my TV. I haven't had a TV in probably 5 years now. It'll be pretty easy to track because, right, there is a transition to the good and the worse and the bad and then back into the good, right? Because I am not giving up, because I am going to adapt and conquer, right? Because I'm going to search out the answers to those questions that impact my life. And because, right, my love for the squirrels and the birds and the trees and my love, I'm from British Columbia, right? I was born in Vancouver, but my dad was a nomad. We lived all over British Columbia. And if there's forest fires, it's going to be pretty bad because, right, it's forestry. It's one of the main economic industries that we contribute to the world is in our forests, right? And yeah, it's going to hit hard. But I'm glad I'm updated on that. And maybe In another few days, I'll just check to see if things are a little bit better. But I won't be sticking around for the next 15 catastrophes that are going on in the world that would just impact me emotionally and put me in a state where, right, the things that I can't control, the things that I don't have a say in, the things that I don't want to bring into my life, and I don't want to have conversations and bring this stuff into the other people's lives like I'm doing right now. But they're only doing it because it serves a lesson in the experience. And unless we have, right, that experience and recognition, how do we have a choice to throw out the TV? I'm not asking anybody to throw out the TV. I threw out my TV 5 years ago, and today was just a reminder as to why I threw that TV out. What I need to know will come across my path, and I do not need to have my fingers dipping in subjects that I don't have an interest in, that I am not compelled to have a voice in, right? And I don't think is personally healthy for me. And if it's not healthy for me, I don't think it would be healthy for anybody, right? Because pretty sensitive, right? And the thing is, highly sensitives and people with a high degree of empathy, right? We are impacted by, right, the crazy town, the hairy scary, the what we don't know, and what's being fed to us. So I'd much rather, right, decide for myself what I'm going to feed the system. Yeah, that was something. Okay, you guys, hi. I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. I don't know where that came from, but I let it flow because, right, comes across my path is meant to be shared, especially when I've hit that live button and it just kind of flows. I just gotta, right, it always fizzles out at some point, but we're going to get right back into it. Hi, if you've never met me before, like I said, I explore the inside and the outside. I bring all kinds of content to my brand. You can take a look at my main page. It started off with urban exploration and exploring abandoned farms and abandoned houses, and all of going back to the Hudson Bay and the traders and the voyageurs, right? Uh, History. I love history, but I love connecting with Mother Nature and, walking through farm fields and, again, being highly sensitive and being empathic. I found a great bit of solace in spending time with myself, right? And it has served me well, and it's still serving me well. And in showing up here, right, fresh like a loaf of bread, I'm hoping that at some point it might serve others. But this show, What's My Good Cheer, for the past 40 weeks or so, we've been picking a powerful word on Monday, and we've been working with that word all week, just in a casual form, just in hitting that live button, having a conversation, seeing what comes to mind in the perspective of myself and an experience or a lesson, or maybe it's somebody else's experience or a lesson of a great thought leader or in their in any aspect of humanity, whether it's political ideas even and religious ideas and cultural ideas and familial traditions, right? That it is in our understanding that it takes all kinds to make the world, that we can have this kind of conversation and have this conversation relevant for anybody and anybody, right? It's not a secret group. It's not a, right, you're not welcome because you don't look like me, you don't live like me, you don't feel like me, right? That anybody is welcome here. And I just us that it's these common values that as humans we um I'm not sure if we genuinely know, right? We understand it's a good and easy way to move with others. It works for us. It's less painful. It's a less of a headache, right? That right? If we're nice and kind, even if we don't feel nice and kind, that right? We can find moments where we can connect to others, and then once we can make a small connection, and we can find a familiarity just through our hobbies and our interests, right? Like for me, mother nature and history and mindset and working in emotions and understanding trauma. I've been in narcissistic and trauma and borderline personality and autism for all day. And it comes across my path. And because I find it interesting and because I'm not finished, just like having a meal, right? Can I have seconds? You feel that way after you've taken it in so that you go ahead and you take the next lesson in. That I find sometimes I can get a little bit um, in my head because it's just so much. So when my live show is over, I'm going to go out for 20 minutes. Maybe I'll walk to the grocery store. Maybe I'll just walk down the street. I live on a main drag, so do a little bit of window shopping or something. Just get some fresh air for myself. I feel cold coming along. I had some people call in sick, and one of them did catch a cold, she said. I'm not quite sure if I really believed her. I understood her to need a day off, but possibly I could have misjudged that, and I will apologize to her, even though she doesn't know I feel that way. But because we have that connection with each other, I will apologize for not believing her when she said that she was sick. Well, we'll see if Cindy gets sick. Only if I get sick. Okay, you guys. Um, yeah, let's pick this word. We are picking 54 words. We are picking our 39th word this week. We'll work with it every single day. And we're getting close. We might have to do a couple of these words over again, but right as the words get less and less, because I only have like 60 or 70 words on this page, and I'm picking 54 of them. I suspect that a couple of these words I will hit again, but I do have a deck of cards to put together. So, right? We do need to get this done. And it's been interesting. I find it curious that it's been more of a lesson for me than what I expected. But you know what? That's good for me to recognize that, if I'm going to ask for something, that, right, I'm going to get the whole package, not just what I've seen, right? That it looks good. It looks good on the outside, but to be able to actually have an experience in just moving forward and just starting. And that's all I did is I just started this. And now we're on our 39th word. Okay, Cindy, shush. Let's pick this word. We are going to work all week. Let's hope it's a word that will serve me well this week because I do get into them. And hoping that maybe, right, it might serve somebody else out there. Here we go. Oh my goodness. You know what? I think this is a good word. And a story came to my mind in this word grace, but it wasn't grace to me. It's really strange because grace is the miracle, right? Grace is, for me, I'll look at terminologies tomorrow, but wow, this is going to be a good word, I think. And this is going to be a good story. I've told this story a couple of times. And to me, it was a miracle. Oh my goodness, for sure. And it also funny that I was talking earlier about my connection to Mother Nature, and we were talking about the fires, right? And I was talking about the squirrels and the deers. But what about the spiders and the bugs, right? And all those little critters that live in the barks of the trees and the grass and the riverbanks. The story is a true story. It 100% happened, and I'm going to tell you how it happened, and you can judge for yourself if you thought it was a miracle. But it was a story of grace, because it wasn't grace for myself, it wasn't grace for another human, it was grace for a little white moth. A little white moth. Uh, my sister used to do so many wonderful kindnesses. She was my best friend, Tracy, in the whole world. She wasn't just my sister, she was my mother. She was my mother. She was my worst enemy sometimes. Cindy, what did you do to your hair? Oh my goodness. Right? She had a very controlling personality, and she thrived in leadership, right? She thrived in being the matriarch of her family, and I gave her that. She was so kind and generous, and life was good hanging around Tracy, right? But I failed to recognize, and it's, in the lesson as we move forward, and I wasn't woke to any of these ideas, or I was just starting to wake. Yes, I was just starting to wake up to some of these ideas. And I had gone to her house, and in for the kindnesses she did for me on my days off, being highly sensitive and empathic, I've always felt that need to give back, and having that little drummer girl kind of attitude where I don't have money, I can't buy her presents, and then I would give her my time, right? So she was a hard worker. She was an executive in a big company, and she pretty much kept that company afloat all by herself. And so I would go to her house, and I would clean her house, and I would work in her garden, and I would cook dinner, and we would watch Big Brother Canada, right? We would have beautiful times. And I'd go over to her house once or twice a week, right? Once or twice a week. I went to the garden to pull weeds, and she had the most amazing garden. Her husband had built a top pond, great big pond that was about 4 feet high, and then it had a waterfall that fell into a creek, and this creek wound around the yard, and then eventually spilled into a great big pool where my sister had water lilies and like fountains and stuff like this. It was an amazing accomplishment. And he was, right, he was a serious narcissist, but he knew his stuff. He was a very, very smart man, right? And he wouldn't let you decide that he was a smart man. He would make sure you knew how smart he was. But this wasn't a story about him. I had a beautiful rock garden that I had put into that pond area, and I'd grown moss all over the rocks and everything, but the weeds would come out, and I went out to the garden with my little bucket to pull weeds and everything. And I started in the back of this big tree behind the creek, okay, or behind the pool, and I there was this little island area part, and I started there. But as I was about to kneel down, I looked in the top pond, and there was a white moth, and this white moth was in this whirlpool in the top of the pond, right? And we had a water pump, and this water pump was sucking from the big pond, like I said, and was spilling into the waterfall that went into the creek that wound around the yard and then into the pool, right? My sister didn't need anything that massive, but he was, if you're going to do something, you got to do it right, right? So And it was fun, and I loved that garden, but I had to pull weeds. I wanted to get the job done, but how was I going to enjoy? Because I enjoyed the garden, right? That was my mother nature. After working all week, I got to have that opportunity to just spend time sitting out in the backyard with the fire pit, or with the pond, and I just loved working in her backyard. But how was I going to enjoy weeding that day when all I could see was this little white moth, and it was going around like in a whirlpool all the way around, and it didn't stop in just that few minutes of me watching it must have gone around at least 10 times, and every once in a while it kind of jiggle around a little bit, try and stay in the same spot and try and like get out of the whirlpool. He'd only get like this far, and then he gets sucked right back into the whirlpool. I couldn't reach it. It was just too far. The pond was too big. I couldn't reach this moth, right? I didn't know what to do. I just went to my weeding, and I'm weeding the garden, and I couldn't stop thinking about this little moth that was in the top pond. And I would stand up every once in a while, and I could see it's still in there, and it's still fighting for its life. And I said, "Hell, what am I going to do?" Right? I can't even enjoy gardening, right? Knowing that that's going on in that pond. And I found this little stick. It was only about this big, right? And I couldn't reach even with the little stick, right? It was just something I found on the ground, and I picked it up, and I couldn't reach. It wasn't even close to being able to reach the moss, so I just kind of went over the edge of the water, and I went, "Come here, come here," right? And I hit the water with my little stick, and I went, "Come here," like I'm calling the dog or I'm calling the cat. And I went that. You guys, not once did I see that moth get more than this far out of the whirlpool. That moth, right? Maybe it was the vibration of the little stick. I don't know. I was still like 4 feet, 5 feet away from it, being able to reach it, right? And I'm just by the edge of the pool, and I'm tapping this stick in the water. I'm going, "Come here, come here." That moth got to my stick. It blew my mind. I was so excited. I was so excited, and I couldn't let this thing get sucked back into that whirlpool, that I'm taking this stick and I'm trying to catch it and like scoop it up like it's a spoon and stuff. And I think I'm drowning this because it wasn't under the water when it was going around the whirlpool, but I'm getting this stick and I'm just pushing it under the water, trying to scoop it out of the water, right? And finally, it clung. It just clung to my stick, and I brought that stick up to my face, and I held my hand behind it, and I blew on that moth, and my warm breath, and it opened up its wings, right? It opened up its wings, and it just let me blow on it. And I just held my hand behind it so I wouldn't blow I had no idea how long it had been struggling for, right? How long it could have been there for a couple of days. I don't know, right? But the pond was lined with rocks, like, those old pioneer homes where they make the rock cellars, right? So the big pond was like that. And so there were little crevices in between the rocks, and it was a nice, warm, sunny day. So I just went like this, and I put the moth, and I shook the end of the stick, and it came off the stick, and it just sat in between this little teeny weeny space in between the rocks, right? And I said, "Okay, just stay there." I thought it would try and fly away or anything. I said, "Just stay there and rest and dry off," right? And I was all proud of myself because I saved the moth, and at the same time, I was kind of shocked. I'm wondering to myself, how that moth could not get out of the whirlpool, It couldn't even get that far out of the whirlpool. And yet it swam to me in a matter of seconds, like 3 or 4 feet. And it went directly to the stick, right? And even though I was drowning it with the stick, somehow it clung to it. So I went back to weeding, right? The garden. And every once in a while I would get up and I would go take a look in the little space in between the rocks. And sure enough, the moth was there. And so I was doing my weeding, and I'm about to go into another section on my garden, and I walked past the little cubby hole, and I stood there for the moment, and I was just like all proud of myself. I saved the moth. I knew the moth was going to survive because it was just sitting there, right, just drying and appreciating the sun. And then the moth flew out of the hole, the crevice, and it went into a leaf right above my head. And it sat there. I would say I was in that garden for over an hour. It sat on that exact same leaf that was maybe, I don't know, 3 feet away from my face, my head. And again, in the garden in different sections, every once in a while, go to the leaf to see if it was still there, if it was still alive, right? And again, that sense of pride. And finished working in the garden, and I was all done, and it looked pretty good. I grabbed my bucket and my tools, and I had a tendency of losing my tools and leaving my tools in the garden and never getting them back. So made sure I had my bucket and everything in my hand, and I walked over to the tree, and I got as close as I could underneath the branch. And right, I like to talk to the animals, and I says, "Oh, I hope you have an amazing day." And I told it, right, let me have a nice day. That moth in that second flew to my cheek, flew to my cheek, right, this cheek. I remember distinctly. It came to my cheek and it went, it touched my skin. Like it went, it like didn't crash, and it specifically came to my cheek. And it took its little wings and its antlers or whatever it was, because I could feel it on my cheek, and it went like this. And then it flew away, and it flew away. I was blown away. It was my first woke experience to a miracle, right? I suspect as a small child, as a teenager, as a young adult, I was pretty feral. There were probably others that other miracles that had come into my experience, but because, right, I didn't recognize it for what it was, or I just thought by my own ego as I did it, it was all me, right? Or oh, close call, or lucky Cindy, right? That I didn't give credit where credit was due. But this day was my first experience with with miracles, right? That moth got some grace. And in exchange for that grace, it showed me that miracles do exist. That miracles do exist. And right, it didn't have to be one of my sisters as of that example, right, that there was that painful medical issue, or right, or a heart attack or diabetes or something that, right, woke me up to this idea of grace, miracles, right, to get another chance to, right, at any moment you could think that you are at your last very end that you think you could possibly even muster, and in that last second be totally lifted up, and again have another chance, like that moth had another chance. And that, you know Miracles have been shown to me a few times in the past half a dozen years or so, but I have to recognize that those miracles have been in those close calls, and those are meant to say, pay attention, Cindy, right? Because I'm somebody, if I make a mistake once, I work really hard not to make that mistake a second time because of the consequences. You're supposed to learn your lessons, right? Right. And it was very painful not to learn my lessons. So I learned to learn my lessons the first time around, if at all possible. Right. Lots of lessons. I need to be beat upside the head, but right. I have to recognize though that Mother Nature, right, has played a role um in teaching me lots of lessons. I could tell more stories on maybe you could look at it as grace, because I have lots of experiences, miracle experiences with birds of all things. The birds love me. Yeah, I don't have to search them out. They search me out. Yeah, isn't that strange? Because first first day we get the word, right? The first day that we get the word, it's the first thing that comes to my mind. And it's funny that that word grace, which is a miracle, right? It's a rebirth. It's a start again. It's another chance, right? And I didn't look at a perspective of maybe an experience I had, right? And maybe in my mind, I'm thinking that there weren't graces for myself. But like I said, there must have been. But I didn't give credit where credit was due because I didn't recognize the source in that. I recognize lots of times praying to God, oh, please, God, right? I'll read the Bible every day. Get me out of this situation or make everything okay. And right, I'll read the Bible every day and I'll say my please and thank yous. And right, there were all kinds of promises. But once you're out of that sticky situation, right, that flow of things are going bad, then things are going even worse. And then things start feeling better. And then things start feeling amazing. Then things are fun. And then there's a crash. And then, right, and it starts all over again. It's just that understanding if, right, as long as you don't give up, right? That you adapt to conquer. You just find a way. The baby steps, the smallest, right? Direction, movement in that direction that you might think might be an out or an in, right? Depending on the direction that you're moving in. That grace has an opportunity to, right, help make that journey a little bit easier. And, right, grace could also make that a lot harder. Oh my goodness. Now, I thought of something when I said that. So maybe I'll lead into that tomorrow, at least give it some thought and some contemplation to see if maybe that would be a good route to do. But tonight, that's it for tonight. We got this word grace this week, and that was my experience and my first including in thoughts when we picked up that word. And again, like I said, I'm curious as to why I didn't direct that word and experience of grace to myself, and I gave it to Mother Nature, right? But I'm also interested in the fact that I came into the conversation talking about Mother Nature too, right? So, interesting. Well, I'm going to get some Mother Nature now. So I'm just going to put on my shoes and I'm going to go for a bit of a walk, get some fresh air. And yeah, we'll see each other tomorrow with another perspective on this word, grace. Have a great night, everybody.